tradition. May I introduce you to the speaker for this? Jan is a Swedish national who has traversed all corners of Mongolia, including the remote Altai Mountains border zone. Today, he will share with us his private off-grid travels and learn how such expedition-style journey can be done in an authentic yet comfortable way while keeping a certain level of luxury. Some of you may also find him familiar, as Jan and his camps were featured on Channel News Asia Sustainable Tourism series In Pursuit of Magic a few years back. So without much further ado, please join me to welcome Jan to hear all about his adventures. Jan, please.
Thank you, everybody. I'm here now to share my screen. So here we go. Share screen, and it should be this one. And there we are.
Yep.
Let me see from the beginning. Okay, now we see a very blue sky. Good evening. I'm talking to you from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, of course, as I live here from time to time, mostly in the summers. We had our first snows about 3-4 days ago. Snow means 0 degrees and snow on the mountains around. Today it is summer again, 11 degrees, so to speak. And here we can see the famous blue sky of Mongolia. I would challenge all of you to find that blue sky anywhere. And as you know, Mongolia is perhaps seen as being on the top of Asia, north of the Great Wall of China. But really it is in the middle of Asia. It's a lot of Russia north of us, which also belongs to Asia. So when you are in the center of a big landmass like Eurasia, you will find that high pressure will form in the center, and you will have weather around it. It's actually the same in North America. So Montana, for example, is also called the blue sky country, and we are called the land of the blue sky. So we have extremely high pressure, 270 sunny days in a year. It doesn't mean it's sunny in the summers. It can rain a little bit, but not at all the way of monsoons and things like that. And here we have sands and lakes together in the Central Asian landlocked basin of the country. So why have walls been built to keep Mongols out is an interesting question. And as you know, this is not in Mongolia. This is a photo from China, Jinshanling, when I trekked it a few years ago. And it is actually a division line between the Chinese and the Mongols. And it means a division between sedentary peoples and agricultural peoples and those of the nomads. So a big province of China is called Inner Mongolia, and there are more ethnic Mongols in China than in the Republic of Mongolia, where I am now, actually. So over here is just about 3 million Mongols living, and it's the least populated country on earth. So why do you need to build walls of it? That's an interesting question. The wall was actually built around 200 BC. And it was not the one that we see today. And the emperor that is in Xi'an, the terracotta armies, as you know, is part of this. He started to build the demarcation land for tax purposes to split the agricultural people, the farmers that could be taxed and the nomads who couldn't be taxed. I always wondered why the Mongols call the Great Wall of China Tsagan Hirim in Mongolian. It means white wall. And it was whitewashed during the Han period. What can it be, 200, 300, 400 AD? And then it has been rebuilt 4 times. And this is the 4th rebuilding from the 1400s, when the Ming dynasty tied it together with real defense walls and so on. And it is thought that during 200 BC, that was just during the Warring States period in China. So The Chinese, they were actually chasing the nomads into their own territory. And that is perhaps the blame, which you cannot always say that the Mongols will, without provocation, attack the China. No, we don't know, of course, but it is being said that the Chinese chased the nomads out into their lands, and then they had to group together and defend themselves. So that is how the first confederation of nomadic tribes came together under one leader, Modul, which was the leader of the Hunnu, or Xiongnu, as the Chinese call it. And here we can see a map of all Eurasia. So I'm a native of Sweden. We have it to the northwest. Up here, you see my cursor there. I'm from that little island. And that grassland comes all the way together. And as you know, we have Indo-European languages here on this map. We have the Russian, Swedish, and German and English are Indo-European languages, but it also means India, right? So Hindi, Urdu, and Bengali, they're also Indo-European languages. And then there is a string of so-called Altaic languages, cutting the Indo-European languages in two split halves. Iranian, Persian is also Indo-European, but Turkish is not. Turkmen is not, Uzbek, Yakut, Altaian, Mongolian, Manchurian. They're all Altaic languages. And what brings them together is the grasslands. And on the grasslands, nomads can live. So all these people, even the Turkish, they were nomads originally. And then they became sedentary. Same with the Manchurians and Turkmens and Uzbeks and so forth. So the nomads remain truly nomadic only in Mongolia, all over this land. And during the Turkic periods, a couple of hundred years after the birth of Christ, these nomads, they were clan societies. And clan societies means that, you know, you have no strong state that will defend your right in a court case. So that's why you have to have a military power. And so it was always like this, that in those days, before Genghis Khan, the horses were very important. So the horses would trade for very high price in both China and India. And the nomads would trade their horses and get really good pay for it. And that paved the way for the Silk Roads, so-called Silk Roads. That was the horizontal big exchange across all Eurasia from 200 BC until the medieval times when Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan Muslim traveler, when Marco Polo, they could travel all the way to China from Europe and North Africa. And they could do this during the so-called Pax Mongolica, when it was peace, because they would use the military power to keep peace in order to keep the trade going. That was the key interest of the nomadic empires. And very little remains from the empire, the great imperial power of Genghis Khan. Actually, very little archaeological remains from the world's largest empire ever seen. We have more burials, graves from the Turkic times, which predates Genghis Khan. And this rock here is from the 700s. It's the runic inscriptions of Tokyonyuk. He was a Gökturk leader. And the Turks, the Turkic nomads, they were dominating Mongolia before Genghis Khan took over, so to speak. So we talk about Turco-Mongol nomads and steppe empires. Those Turkic states, they left much more archaeology than the imperial times of Genghis Khan. And then after, during the Qing dynasty, which is the last Chinese dynasty, we also have archaeology from more recent times. Those runic descriptions is not Viking ones, where I come from. We have similar ones, but they were crafted in very much the same way. So all of Eurasia were connected by the nomadic mobility, so to speak. And here is a photo from, I know that Intric had a webinar maybe last month or 2 months ago with Sophie Ibbotson, and she explained very well about the great history of the Timurids which is 1400s after the Genghis Khan's empire. But Genghis Khan's son grandson Hulegu invaded Iran and governed all Iran in the 1300s, and the capital was Tabriz. And when the Mongols conquered sedentary powers, they ruled these powers in a different way. They had to put themselves on the top, and they worked with the existing princes, and they intermarried with local princesses to have good trade going. And this fantastic architecture comes out of Iran and Central Asia, was later exported to India. And all of you, maybe many of you, have been to the Taj Mahal, which is from the Mughal Empire. And what does the Mughal mean? Yeah, it means Mongol in Persian language. And most of Mongol history is written down in Persian and Arabic. So we have only, during the recent 10, 15, 20 years, historians have been starting to translate the Persian and Arabic text, and we have done a lot of headway on the history of the Mongols. So they left a legacy in the sedentary societies which they conquered, including China. The modern borders of China were defined during the Kublai Khan's period, who is the grandson of Genghis Khan. And his mom was Sorhtani, the queen, and she gave birth to 3 big Khans. What a lady. Fantastic. So this was the largest empire on the world, and it split up in 4 parts, so to speak. So the Khanate of the great Khan was Kublai Khan, and the Chagatai Khanate was in Central Asia, that was Chagatai. And the Khanate of the Golden Horde was of Jochi. He was the son of Genghis Khan, and his son Batu ruled it. And they became Muslims, intermarried and speaking Turkic around the Volga River. And the Ilkhanate in Persia was ruled by Hulegu and some other Khans. So it's a fantastic history, really. What is even more interesting is that when all this lost its power during the gunpowder states, gunpowder and the bubonic plague brought down the Mongol Empire, we can say. And trade routes started to take more serious ways through the seas, through the oceans. So the country of Mongolia remains still today the least populated country on earth. 30–40% of its entire population are nomads. And they're really an equestrian people, a horse people, so to speak. And still today, as it was 2,000 years ago, they live from livestock breeding. In this case, what you see in the front, they are goats. And what do you get from the goats? Yeah, you get cashmere wool. And this is the undercoat of the goats. And that is being harvested in August, I think, and then sold. So this is one of the key cash incomes for Mongolia's nomads. They're starting to use motorbikes, but they love their horses. And here we see a pole lasso, which you can catch horses with it. So Mongols, they prefer not to eat the goats, but they prefer the sheep. And still live in yurts. And in Mongolian language, we call them gir. And the yurts were more common all across Eurasia, along the grasslands, and still being used in Kyrgyzstan, but you don't have the same pastoralist movements in Kyrgyzstan anymore, or in the Altai. In Central Asia, a lot of the last nomads disappeared during the 1930s, during the, how do you say, the Stalinist time, the purges of the 1930s, which was a very, quite a terrible time in the Soviet history, and also in Mongolia. And it was mismanaged collectivization, and a lot of people died in famine. So with that, nomadism disappeared, I would say, in most of Russia, except for the high Arctic, of course, where we have the reindeer peoples. But close to Mongolia's borders, there was only that. And ancient practices, for example, these birds, this is kind of falconry, you would call it in English, but the bird is actually an eagle, a golden eagle. And they hunt with the female birds for fox on horseback. And you can see that the hunter, he has a huge fur coat. And it's because you can see there is snow on the ground. It's really cold here for most parts of the year. And again, you can see the blue sky. This is probably a photo from October, right about this time. But we have had a very warm fall this year. Normally, we get snow near Ulaanbaatar for a day or two around 5th of September. So we need to think of Mongolia as being south of Siberia rather than north of China in terms of climate. You should think that it can be colder than Siberia because it is 1,000 meters higher than the face of Lake Baikal, which is the deepest lake in the world, just north of Mongolia in Russian Siberia. So this eagle hunting has got a revival in recent years because when the country democracy came, all these ancient customs started to flourish that were hidden. And there are festivals on eagle hunting in the cold period, September and October, because the hunting takes place in the wintertime, because you need to see the tracks of the foxes and hares and rabbits and so forth. Festivals, plenty of them. In July, we have the Nadam festivals, and they're celebrated, of course, with horse races. And there can be so many horses being released. And the jockeys, they are kids because it is long distance horse races, really long distance, 32 kilometers gallop. So they would start from the finish line and trot very slowly 32 kilometers out. And at the turning point, they would turn and gallop back. So the total is 64 kilometers. Kids between 4 to 12 years old. And here is from Ulaanbaatar city, Nadam, which is outside the city with about 800 or 900 horses in each race, covering the age group of 5 ride horse classes. They even race with foals, 2 years old, 3 years olds, and females and 5-year-olds, adult horses. And this is a girl who won the race for her horse and probably her father or uncle who trained the horse. And you can see the wooden plaque that she is holding very seriously. It is number 1. Actually, the first 5 horses are considered as winners. Mongolia is also a Buddhist country. And here Lamaism is practiced. As you know, it is a Buddhist religion that originates from Tibet, perhaps, or even India, and then it filtered its way through Tibet and all the way to Mongolia. Actually, the word Dalai Lama is a Mongolian word. Dalai means ocean in Mongolian. It means ocean of wisdom. And many Mongolian men are named Dalai, and big lakes in Mongolia, we don't have oceans here, are called Dalai. So that was imported in 2 waves in the 15 and 1700s. First through Emperor Kublai Khan, who ruled over China, but later a bit more seriously in the 16 and 1700s. This is from a photo from the Hamar Monastery in the southeast of Mongolia. So the map, it's a big country actually. You don't realize that Mongolia is the 18th biggest country on earth, 18th. Russia is number 1, China is bigger, and sandwiched between it in the west we have Kazakhstan. It is the 9th biggest country in the world. So it looks really tiny, but it isn't, and we have very few roads. So when we go to the west, as you can see out into the west where I have my cursor, you want to fly there. The drive to there is 5 days. If you drive 8 hours per day and do not stop for pee or lunch, 5 days. If you drive through the night, you need 48 hours and 2 drivers. So when we travel out here and have to bring provisions here, we have to mix provisions from Russia and from Ulaanbaatar, because here we have very little infrastructure. It's totally off-grid. Of course, the northern part of the country, we have forests. Siberia is in the north, and we can see the Lake Baikal is in the northern part here. It is 1,630 meters deep, right? And it's about 430 meters above sea level, Lake Baikal. But this lake here, which is the twin of Lake Baikal, it is done in the same, it is created 25 million years ago together with Lake Baikal in a rift, like the Rift Valley in Africa. This little lake is 1,200 meters higher than Lake Baikal. So this is the Mongolian plateau, and all of the south is the Gobi Desert, so to speak. It is 33 different ecosystems. And to the east, we have a lot of grasslands. The Altai Mountains are in the west, and it has about 20 glaciers there, and we have 3,600 rivers in the north of the country, draining out to Russia in different ways. Now let's move to a little bit of tourism. Here is Jalman Meadows. It is a kind of a boutique size camp because it has only 14 guest units. It's totally off-grid, so it's in a strictly protected area. It has a license there, so it doesn't have flush toilets. You have to do everything without the assistance of electricity and piped water. So yak carts will go down to the river, carry water, and for drinking water, it comes from town, of course. So there are 14 guest units, and the restaurant is in the middle here. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 shower yurts and a little shop. And here is a WC, and there are small WCs also in between the yurts, which are very close for night, which one can put up. And the river is a little bit down here. This is the Tool River, which actually is upstream from Ulaanbaatar, about 120 kilometers. It's in the green part of Mongolia, and there where we have green, we have an elevation, we have yaks. And this is actually a crossbreed with cow, which is called Hainak, but in Tibet, they will call them Zo, if you have been to Tibet. And here we have a photo of Tumersukh. He's one of our neighbors to that semi-permanent camp of Jalman Meadows. And the gears, the yurts, they look like this, and they look just like any other nomadic home from the outside. However, from the inside, they are adapted for guests. This is twin beds, and you can see with the wooden floor and the wood burning stove so that you can keep warm when September comes and so on. You would also open the flaps, you see this orange that surrounds the yurt. You can take it open. So if you have some 27 degrees, like in July, August, you can open the bottom of the yurt, and on the top there is a skylight. So the air can circulate much more than in a regular room. You can see up here, it's open to the sky. Of course, when it rains, you have to cover it. But it doesn't rain like in monsoonal Asia at all. We have all the year round around 400 millimeters per year. And that is about the same as in Sweden. But it rains mostly heavy, and then sunny comes again. So it's really nice and refreshing with rains in the summer times. We want it. Here is another interesting adaptation to off-grid travel at Jalman Meadows. There is organized a hot shower in those small yurts that I showed you. So up here is a bucket, and the staff can fill it with hot water and there is a shower handle here, and you can lock the door, and here is a wood burning stove, and even a mirror here, which can slide up and down the roof poles. So, if you're tall or short, so to speak. And there are, of course, towels and morning gowns for this purpose. So it is, most of Mongolia has very short visiting season, only 2-3 months, 3.5 at the very most in the whole year. So return on investment to build big fancy lodges simply do not exist in most cases. Here is another twin boutique camp called the Ignat Rocks, which is 1 day's drive, perhaps 7-8 hours from the first camp. And you shift to the Gobi climates, or Gobi biome, so to speak. And here we do not have, you see, yaks, we will have camels and rocks. And the nature around this camp is more Asian, whereas in Jalman Meadows, it totally belongs to Siberia and the circumpolar north, with the red deer, with moose, with brown bears and wolves. And each of these camps have a restaurant gear or restaurant yurt with attached kitchen so that you can have nice meals in there. In the Gobi warm summer nights, it's wonderful to have sundowners on the rocks, and the stargazing is just fantastic. Let us then move to more conventional lodges. And actually we have only one, which is the Three Camel Lodge. It's the signature lodge of Mongolia. It's on grid. It has piped in flush toilets and electricity. So it's connected to the grid. Fantastic bar. And here we have a similar way. It's a yurt with a double bed and also a wood burning stove in the center, as all yurts have. The difference between Three Camel Lodge and the other lodges you just saw is that it has another yurt that doubles. So you have 2 yurt units, and it's built in a shower and toilet inside your ensuite room, so to speak. And the Three Camel Lodge do not have just 14 guest units. It's about 40 guest units, and it's located in the south of the country where most visitors travel. And here is a image from the mountains, the Gurvan Mountains, which is about 1 hour drive from Three Camel Lodge. Very few people visit this little temple. It's mostly empty and abandoned because the local people go there on certain occasions only. But it has been built in the process of revival of Buddhism in Mongolia following the democratization of the country. Now we have the more mobile camps, and that is a bit pricier. And these camps can be private for just one small group, maybe 6 to 8 people, maximum 12. And they offer full mobility. So in this way, you can travel all across the country. Here is in the desert. Here is in the north of the country. You can see the gears are right here. And this is in the Altai Mountains. And these are actually all guest gears. And here we have 1,000 stars sky, if you like. And we have to bring out fantastic catering. So the supply lines are much better nowadays. So we can get imports and local produce of many, many kinds. And we have cooks that can operate and be mobile. So which means that you can travel to anywhere in the country if you go glamping, so to speak, or 5-star camping, as I would call it. And here we have one of the cooks from Ulaanbaatar. He's one of the best cooks in the country, and doing a little bit know-how transfer to a local lady here. This is one of his signature dishes that can be produced totally off-grid anywhere in the country where we have access to water. This is the inside of the mobile camps. So it's fairly similar to Three Camel Lodge and Jalman Meadows or Ignat Rocks, but it will also not have en-suite bathroom. It will have some morning gowns and everything else that you would expect in a hotel. And the showers will be in tents. So this is a shower tent here to the right, the blue one, and here is a toilet tent to the left. And the toilets look like this. In order to be mobile, these are pop-up camps or fully collapsible, if you like. You can load them onto a yak cart or a camel cart, a caravan. You can fold the entire camp onto the yak carts and walk with them, or ride horses, if that is what you would like to do. So to look at the map, the infrastructure has been built up. You see to the south, where my cursor is going. Three Camel Lodges down here in the southern part of the Gobi. We saw the other Gobi camp, which was Ignat. It is here in the east of Gobi. It is a rocky Gobi with no sand dunes, with rock formation. Jalman Meadows is up here in another direction. So few people go in these places. So this have a lot of visitation, and also this lake up here. A lot of Mongolian tourists go to the lake sides in July. But most of the river trips can be here on the border with Russia, on the Onon River, on here, and on the Tul River, just about here. The west of Mongolia is culturally distinct. It has Kazakh culture. Kazakhs are Sunni Muslims, not Buddhists, and they speak a Turkic language, which is Kazakh. It's a different pastoralist country, but they are more traditional than in Kazakhstan itself. So they are the ones that are pastoralists and still hunt with eagles. It is in this part over here. So it's impossible to see everything in 14 days. You need to choose what kind of experience you would want to see and experience. So it's a landscape and people-centered travel destination. And great landscapes and nomads we have everywhere. So it's not that site-specific where you go or must go. But if you want to experience eagle hunters, it's out in the west. The big lake here, float trips, it's specific. The Gobi is 1/3 of Mongolia. It is close to everything, whether you go west or east or north or south. We have also some private airstrips around the country, so we can fly Cessna caravans to compress the time, because it takes a lot of time to travel around the country. And this bike can be loaded into this Cessna caravan by yak carts and flown 1 hour south to Ignat, and then offload it with the camel carts and continue like this. That's 1 hour flight or 8 hours in overland travel. Visiting local nomads is easy. People are very welcoming because they lead very isolated lives throughout the years. And during the summer, it's an easy time for them because the grass is fat, make their livestock fat, and they are on the summer pastures. They move around the whole year. This is a Kazakh gear, so I can see that it's from Western Mongolia, the way it is decorated. This is Jargal Sakhan. It's one of our horse wranglers. He leads horse riding trips. Speaks no English, I'm sorry, just Mongolian, because he's a true nomad, and horse riding is, of course, available. You should be a good experienced horse rider to ride for several days. Otherwise, you can just sit up on a horse and one can lead it for you. And the camel excursions in the west, we have the Gobi Sands also out in the west, which is quite unknown. This is Durgal Lake of Harusnu National Park. And it's quite unusual to see the beach of sands and camels at the same time. This is the East Gobi. So this was now the West Gobi. I told you the South Gobi is Three Camel Lodge. And here's the East Gobi near the Ignat, where you have the rock formations. It has more wildlife than anywhere else in the Gobi, and it has also more nomads. Mountain bikes are quite nice to have at this East Gobi area, whereas in the South Gobi, it doesn't really work because there is more sandy subsoil, so that doesn't really, it become very heavy to bike over there. I told you before that we have 3,600 rivers in the north, and so we do float trips every now and then, and for several days. This is the Hoopskull Canyons on the Russian border with Tuva. Here we have another of the 360 camps that are put into place of the river. And why? Because it's offered fly fishing trips here. And you can see all the boats here. So you float from camp to camp. It's about 11 to 14 kilometers between 8 camps. So you can float for a whole week or for 3-4 days in the Hoopskull Canyons. And you can even go further upstream and load inflatable kayaks and rafts onto camelback and walk into the wilderness and float back out. So those canyonscapes, they are really remote. So you cannot have a truck to deliver the luggage from camp to camp. So we load it onto the rafts. So the local people who are good on horses, they had to learn how to row. And that is a fairly recent phenomenon, I would say. A parking lot for the rafts. And on the rivers, this is now the Onon River in the northeast. You can organize fly fishing for fishes such as Lennox trout or the taimen. Taimen is huge. It is the biggest caught in 2019 was almost 1.5 meter tall, long. It is the biggest salmonid in the world and red listed. So you need very special permits to fish for them. And they need to be catched and released and fished with single barbless hooks. Wildlife, yes. Comparing to the circumpolar north, we have quite a lot of wildlife, but it's not like India or Africa, where you have big herds of ungulates. The wildlife has retreated quite a lot because the nomadic culture is also living there and competing with the wildlife. But in remote areas, we have these sheep. They are called the Argali sheep. It's the biggest wild sheep in the world. And it is the prey species for an interesting cat called the Snow Leopard. It's not an ordinary cat. As you can see, it is a leopard. It can jump 6-7 meters from standstill. It always stalks onto its prey. This one is, you can see on the top here between the ears, you can see a collar. It is photographed when it has been caught and fitted with the GPS collar. So you can, wildlife researchers can then follow it, and you can set the watch so that it emits signals every 20 seconds or every minute or every 2 minutes or every 20 minutes. Accordingly, the battery will last for half a year or 1 year or something like that, and then the collar will release itself. They're very hard to see. You can see how it blends in with the environment. So they're very, very difficult to get to see. And to the end here, I would just mention that this is actually not Mongolia. This is Altai Mountains on the Russian side. So it is possible to travel out or into Mongolia from Russia. And it is a very scenic highway, very good road that takes 2 days to drive. And it's a spectacular wilderness over there. It's called the Altai Republic. And you can also travel in or out to Mongolia from the East Gobi by taking a train to Beijing or starting in Beijing, and you do not have to come all the way to Ulaanbaatar the first thing you do. But the Russian part is really spectacular. Bit of a headache is to get a Russian visa. It's not the smoothest process in the world. And here are some photos from the Chulisman Canyon, which is beside that road. It's called the Chuya Highway. So I told you Mongolia is really, we are coming to winter right now actually, and this is a photo from February, just to give you an idea that this is the lake up in the north right? You see right here on the north, the twin lake of Lake Baikal. I have my cursor on it. This ice freezes over very, very quickly. So it is 1 meter and 30 centimeters deep, and you can actually see the fishes through it. It's so transparent. And those horses are fitted with horseshoes. Otherwise, Mongolian horses do not have horseshoes, but they have like spikes under them. And from that, you have the canter. You have to canter. The horse have to have 3 hooves on the ice all the time in order not to slip. So as you can see, the snow is there, but it's quite bare here on the mountains. So it's actually fluffy and very dry snow because it's a dry country with a lot of blue sky. So the snow will fly away and dispose of itself. So it's really very challenging to go skiing here. But I have done ice skating with, of course, Swedish ice skaters. We love wild ice skating. But if you come in the winter, you have to be truly winter competent, especially when going to the loo. The capital of Ulaanbaatar sits at 1,400 meters above sea level, roughly. And we have just got a new airport. Shangri-La Hotels invested together with a conglomerate over here in a Shangri-La hotel. So that offers the same kind of service that you would find everywhere else in Asia, where there are Shangri-La hotels. And in the front here, we see the Chojin Lama temple. And we have I have my office right next door also. And if you're lucky, you would be able to see the Mongolian catwalk. It's a really interesting fashion design that we have here, especially for Asian guests. It is Mongol contemporary art, I would say. So this was my last slide. It's now 45 minutes into the webinar, and we would be happy to take questions and so forth. Having the map here, so just to repeat, we have the forest up here, we have the rivers in this part of the country. The dry Gobi parts is all this. You see my cursor, the southern 1/3. The Altai Mountains is over here where the glaciers and eagle hunters are. The capital, Ulaanbaatar, is here. The railway to China is this way, yeah? Beijing is down here. And the railway continues up to Ulan-Ude and to Irkutsk on Lake Baikal. And the road in from Russia was out here. You see in the upper left corner, I have my cursor. This road comes in from here. And then we have poor Mongolian road in the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan. Thank you very much for your presentation.